But before I open up the questions, as I had sort of taken the liberty of mentioning in the beginning, three leading questions for three panelists, and I'll begin with Jahangir. Jahangir, we have had a very large amount of opinion coming out from distinguished economists and experts on both sides of the story. But I think if we look at the opinions that were initially expressed, vis-a-vis the ones that are coming out now, there's a tendency to kind of now become a little bit more critical of the move than it was in the beginning. And I think the upside of it is very simple. If we take all the criticisms together, whether it be Paul Krugman, whether it be Kaushik Basu, whether it be Pranav Seth, whatever, that this has been done in a highly disruptive fashion. And the impact of that disruption is significant. The point is, nobody is at a point to actually determine how significant will that be. So there are numbers going around in terms of what Dr. Manmohan Singh said in the parliament in terms of 2% decline in GDP. And there are others who have not gone that far, but have nonetheless been concerned. Now, I think if we assume, and I'm not asking you to hazard a guess on this, but I'm just taking one point forward from here. Given the fact that this is a disruptive process, and we assume that the long-term benefits of this are that India transitions into a cashless society, corruption becomes less and so forth. It's going to be a different area if people actually implement this the way it should be. Much more plastic money transactions, much more reliance on debit cards and mobile wallet. But there are people who can't do this. There are people who haven't been doing this. There are people who will take very, very long time to do this. Now, as economists, do you think that India stands this risk of getting divided between two groups of people who probably very easily are adapting, picking onto this, like as Abhijit brought up? There are people cashless, very comfortable with the whole idea, very adept to the idea. And on the other hand, a very large section of people, and I'm not necessarily talking about the informal sector people, even among us, middle class, senior citizens, elderly people, who might be totally lost and left out of the process. Do you see that as a long-term risk?
I think, if you look at, the way you posed it raises the question of two Indias. Well, we've had many, many two Indias. This will be another two India, the digital India and the non-digital India. I think if you go to countries, let's say, I'm going to take an absurd example, Germany. The amount of cash, amount of transaction that is done by cash is one of the highest in the world. Followed by Switzerland, followed by, I think, the US, I'm not exactly sure. But Germany is one of the highest users. And if you ask why they use cash, and the answer lies in something what Abhijit was talking about. I do not want to give out information. Cash makes me anonymous. So I think the point that you're trying to make, that some people will, that we will move to a cashless society, it's a very hard thing for me to imagine. That we can move to a cashless society. Even Ken Rogoff in his book will admit that one of the problems with all his arguments is the Neil Wallace 1982 paper, which says that we have no real understanding of why we hold cash. Now, the other point that I would talk about is that there is way too much emphasis on cash being the vehicle of quote-unquote black wealth, not of black activity, of black wealth. And that is where the frustrations of economists, quote-unquote, Kaushik Basu and everybody else is, that there are much easier, much more direct ways in which you can cull black money than by going through this experiment. And one example is something that a lot of people have worked on, which is transfer pricing and misinvoicing of exports and imports. That's where most estimates would put is the largest amount of black wealth creation that takes place. Far larger in every year than the 1% or 2% of GDP of black wealth that we might be able to extract from all of this. I think that's where the economist frustration comes about, which is where you see all of those people coming out and saying, come on guys, what are you doing?
Thanks, Jahangir. Now let me turn to Abhijit. Abhijit, before I sort of get on to my question, there's an interesting information I wanted to share. I just saw it on the Times of India headlines that the Russian embassy has lodged a formal protest with the government of India, complaining that diplomats in its mission in Delhi and elsewhere are unable to function properly because of lack of access to cash. And if this doesn't get resolved, they were to summon the Indian counterpart in Moscow for further action. So this is the possibility of now blowing up into an external crisis, and we have to take Mr. Putin seriously in today's world.
Retaliatory demonetisation.
And he's a part of the BRICS, more importantly, so the BRIC could crack. But on a serious note, Abhijit, there's one point probably which we haven't touched upon, and I just want to bring that to your notice. What we are seeing in India now for the last 2 years, and to an extent justified for the right reasons, there's an effort to cut down on black money, unaccounted wealth, ensure that there's hot money flow which is not as much as it was before. There are efforts to stop treaty shopping. There are efforts to amend offshore center tax treaties. But at the same time, all this is also leading to a situation where you're seeing much more tightening of income tax rules and regulations, and probably a comeback of authority, in the sense there are people who are going to implement these actions. Income tax, tax officials, regulators, and there's a greater amount of additional power which is getting vested in them. How do you visualize this development from an investor's perspective? Does this make India a somewhat scary country now?
Thank you, Amitendu. The question merits a day's deliberation. Probably all of you know that the world is changing in the tax point of view. A single acronym called BEPS, Base Erosion Profit Shifting, is creating a lot of changes in the way people used to do business earlier. That's not the same way they will do business in future. The underlying objective of the BEPS is that the profit should be where the value drivers are. And India, for quite some time, and the Indian tax authorities are in the forefront of this initiative also. BEPS is an initiative initiated by OECD countries, and then the G20 came into play. So India has been contributing into the BEPS initiative discussion. And for a long time, India has been challenging a lot of foreign investors who are penetrating the Indian market to do business as to whether they're leaving behind the right share of the profit in India on which India has the right to tax. So over the period of that last couple of years, a lot of laws has come into play, a lot of laws has been promised to also come into play, and we have heard acronyms like POEM and GAR and the likes. So all of this has given more power and more ammunition to the Indian authorities to ensure that India collects its fair share of tax. Now, what is a fair share from an Indian tax authority's point of view may not be considered as the fair share from another country's tax authority's point of view. And that then leads to international dispute and debate. And you already heard about Amitendu saying about the diplomatic debate, Russia and India. In the tax world, that debate is now ongoing between India and many other countries. The only way to resolve such kind of debate is to invoke and discussion between the Indian tax authorities and the other countries' tax authorities, which we call a bilateral advance pricing agreement, BAPA for short. And normally, this kind of agreements is reached if the treaty between India and the other country provides for such provision. Now, sitting in Singapore, from where maximum investment in the last year has gone into India, this is of utmost importance from a Singapore investor's point of view to ensure that you can engage into a BAPA discussion so that you sleep in peace for future. But unfortunately, the treaty that Singapore has with India does not provide for that clause to be triggered off. So we cannot, as of today, engage into a bilateral advance pricing agreement with the Indian tax authorities from Singapore. What we can do, we can have unilateral decisions. So Singapore may decide, okay, out of 100, 60 belongs to Singapore, 40 belongs to India, and India has to agree that 40. If India says 50, then you have a double taxation of that day. Unfortunately, that is the current situation. As all of you know, that Singapore-India tax treaty is now under discussion, and it is expected, because we have made a lot of representation to both sides, to include this particular provision so that the future dispute can be avoided. So we must all understand that this kind of action, what has been happening in India over the last many years, will lead to dispute, but dispute can be mitigated provided there are proper means adopted within the treaties that the countries have with India. So just to answer that from one perspective, even with this demonetization impact, there will be a lot of disputes even at the local level, but there must be enough machinery and wherewithal to address those disputes and resolve it quickly. Otherwise, if it goes on staggering up the value chain to the Supreme Court, it will be back to square one again.
Thanks, Abhijit. And I have a final question for Dr. Rao before I get on to the audience. Sir, apart from being in charge of matters at the RBI, you have also been a very successful administrator. You have seen the administration bottom up. Now, if I now put the story on the other side, and if you look at demonetization, and the administrative lessons to be learned from the implementation of demonetization, are there any insights that you would like to share? And let me more specifically come to what I'm hinting at. I'm looking at India implementing a very milestone economic initiative in a few months' time, which is the goods and services tax. Now, what we have seen with demonetization is that, notwithstanding the benefits that it might produce in the medium term, this actually was an administrative nightmare in a number of respects. And there was probably there's probably no denying the fact that there was an overestimation of the capacity of institutions to handle this. Now, demonetization was just limited to banks, and the banking regulator in India is one of the best in the world. But when we look at the GST, at this point in time, if GST comes in, we are going to have the central government and 20 states with their agencies, tax machineries, producers, manufacturers, retailers, everybody getting onto a GST network in a country where in 75% of the geography, even 2G broadband doesn't work properly. So, what as an administrator would you think are the lessons to be taken from GST? This is not to put you in a tight spot in any way.
Thank you, Amit, and thank you for those compliments to me as an administrator. I don't think I have to serve them. Thanks anyway. You know, I want to say that there are some very negative stereotypes about Indian bureaucracy. Bureaucracy in general, and Indian bureaucracy, that it is unresponsive, insensitive, wooden-headed, irresponsible. I think some of that is true, but you can't underestimate the capacity of the Indian bureaucracy. The way we conduct elections in India, in 600,000 villages across the country, nobody is denied the vote right, the right to vote. The way we conduct census every 10 years, the way we do everyday administration that doesn't catch headlines, but India functions. I think that's a great tribute to Indian bureaucracy. I'm not denying all the maladies of Indian bureaucracy, Indian administration. But you also have to acknowledge its very rare strengths, very unique strengths, and practically unprecedented for any other country that is got such high population and such huge problems. I used to work, you talked about the GST implementation. I used to work in the World Bank and on African countries. And so, talking about the late 90s, early this decade, we used to go to African countries and say, no, I think you should do that. You tell the finance secretary, finance minister, you should do that, and then ask a few questions. And then say, okay, when do you want us to do it? We say, okay, well, we're on 6th of December, how about 1st July next year? They said, fine, how much will you give us? Will you train our people, etc., etc.? There'll be a few sensible questions, and then we will reach an agreement. I was Finance Secretary for Andhra Pradesh in Hyderabad when we were shifting from endpoint sales tax to VAT. World Bank, IMF, all these leading experts from the world used to come and talk to us. And we used to take them not just to Hyderabad, but to district headquarters and sub-district towns with a population of 50,000. And I used to expose these leading experts from around the world to our, not our top-level commissioner of sales tax, not the second-level guy, not the third-level guy, but the 10th-level guy. And that 10th-level guy in Indian tax administration will ask questions of the leading expert in the world on tax that the leading expert has not thought about before. So that is the depth of capacity in India. I don't mean this as a negative comment on Africa. I have a lot of love for Africa. But I want to say that you can't underestimate the capacity of Indian administration to implement even a complex tax structure like GST.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rao. Now it's open to the floor for questions or rational use of time. Maybe we can take 3 questions in the first round from the floor. Please do identify yourself and indicate which of the panelists you want to answer from. And there are microphones on both sides of the aisle if you want to use them. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. My name is JP Jaiswal, Managing Director of Rupee International. My question is actually to Dr. Subbarao. While demonetization, of course, largely being told that it is aimed towards the control of black money as well as terrorism and all those stuff, there are some alternative views just as came into picture. I just want your opinion on that. Some people are saying that it's a kind of mask to probably cover up the huge amount of debt the big conglomerates are owing to the banks, and banks has run out of cash. Probably one of the examples like the Vijay Mallya fled to London and the 1,200 crores.
Sir, can I request you in the interest of time to kindly come to the question that you want to ask?
Yeah, so my question is the opinion on those kind of point which is being made that the biggest conglomerate has been given huge amount of debts which banks are unable to call back, and that is the reason one of these things has been done to structure that. And if you can just analyze, because you have been the governor of RBI, what are the government steps towards this kind of people, those borrow money and just fled away? I mean, just you can give an opinion on that. And my second question to you is, just now you were saying that probably 18 to 20% of money probably may not come to the bank's line, which is a black money. But of course, certainly, there are those monies which has been illicitly printed outside India. Those doesn't form part of this. So probably all those will also go down the drain with this excellent. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, please.
My name is Gurdeep Singh. My first question is very similar to what the previous gentleman said. None of the speakers have touched on what is the impact of this demonetization on the illicit money that will definitely not come back. Hopefully the banks are smart enough to detect that and not accept that and deposit into the banks. Secondly, I've heard that one of the biggest beneficiaries of this demonetization is one of the areas that had the least amount of corruption in the past, and that is the financial sector. And the bank managers are the ones who are walking away 20% commission of the bulk of the money that they're changing on behalf of the ordinary people.
Is there any particular panelist you want your response from?
No.
Anyway. Okay, please.
My name is Alok Sharma, Portfolio Manager at Millennium Capital. I think it's linked to the second question, which is there is an impression that the amount of money which will be put back actually might be more than the money in circulation because of there's a lot of fake money which is in circulation. So have you thought about that situation? If that were to happen, what would the government or Reserve Bank do? This is specifically to Dr. Subbarao. Thank you.
Maybe we can take maybe one or two more questions if they are there right now, or I can ask the panelists to respond to this. Yes, sir.
Okay, my question is to Dr. Subbarao first. Will the money going into the banks in this quantity help the interest rate to go down? Because the banks would have money in the current accounts and saving accounts, and they would not need so many fixed deposits. Second is the supply chain perspective that we heard from our analyst from JP Morgan. Sorry, I can't see the name. I think it's, wouldn't the supply chain adjust by itself in times to come, where people will slowly start using the genuine money or the white money or the let's assume, give benefit of doubt, if the GST comes and tax structure reduces the tax, won't all that adjust by itself? I also heard that the transfer pricing mechanism could help to resolve this problem. That was really confusing. If there is transfer pricing, there are already regulations, and I think people who have done wrong transfer pricing in past and they have accumulated black money, I don't think anything can be done to that. In future, I think it's an enforcement issue. It is nothing to say that if you fix transfer pricing, the black money could be reduced. I don't understand that. And
Okay,
then,
thank you, sir. Do you have any more questions? Maybe we can just now tie this up and sir, if you could give as economically and timely rational responses to this as possible, we can possibly squeeze in another later round of questions. Thank you.
First, on all these conspiracy theories, that demonetization is actually a ruse for helping corporates. Demonetization is actually a ruse for the government to get some windfall profit transfer from the Reserve Bank. Demonetization is for the government to play Robin Hood, to take money from the public and from the black money holders and give it to poor people, etc. I have no view on this. I hope it is not true. I believe it is not true. And there is no basis for any of these conspiracy theories. That's my first answer. The second thing about Gurdeep Singh asked about counterfeit currency. Counterfeit currency has always been an issue. Indeed, the first reason given by the government in the press release for demonetization actually to hit that counterfeit currency. It's always been a big issue. It's something that has engaged the Reserve Bank, the government, and state governments. Counterfeit currency is an issue beyond the Reserve Bank. We found during my time in the Reserve Bank, I suppose it is true even today, that the incidence of counterfeit currency is much higher in India states which have international borders. And our intelligence agencies, our police agencies, our banking agencies, the Reserve Bank are cognizant of that. The Reserve Bank is responsible for counterfeit currency that comes into the banking system. There is no way the Reserve Bank can police counterfeit currency in the market. The Reserve Bank is responsible once it comes into the banking system and to make sure that if a counterfeit currency comes in, it is detected and stopped there and not put back in circulation. During my tenure at the Reserve Bank, we've done a number of things to make sure that we minimize the incidence of failure to detect. That counterfeit currency does come in, but we extinguished that in the banking system. The second thing we did, of course, was to train police people, train intelligence agencies, share information, coordinated effort by all concerned. Intelligence agencies, state governments, police, central government, vigilance, reserve banks, etc. to hit that counterfeit currency. This is not a battle that's going to finish or whenever, with a closure date. It's something that will go on, but the hope is that we will be able to minimize the incidence of counterfeit currency. I will leave there and refer to Jahangir on interest rates.
Sure. I think on the interest rate front, you're already seeing an impact being felt through, not on deposit rates, not so much on lending rates, because all of this increase in bank deposit that is taking place is seen by banks as temporary. So you will see bank deposits go up from now till December 31st, and then it will start coming down as the cash that the RBI starts printing starts slowly being taken out from these banks and deposits. So because this is not permanent, because most banks believe that by June, July, when the supply of notes, whether it's 500 or 2,000, will cover all of the money that has come in, or that money that needed to be replaced, they are willing to do anything on lending rates and on borrowing rates, on deposit rates. However, on government bond side, there has been a significant decline in yields, not just because of the massive increase in bonds, because the place where the banks would want to park this additional amount of deposit that's come in, which is very large, in almost 10-12% of GDP, is in government bonds, and therefore the government bond prices have rallied and yields have come up, and same thing with interbank rates have come down. But I don't think that's going to have any impact on deposit rates or on lending rates, simply because it is being seen as temporary. It is here today, it will go away by June. That was, I think, the question on right. So on the supply chain, let me give you an example. So if you go to the city of Bombay, for example, a very large portion of Bombay's supply chains goes to Dharavi. If you go to Dharavi, you will find that, the Dharavi is a residentially zoned place. There is absolutely no way in which you can have any industrial activity in Dharavi. The reason why I do not want to pay taxes and I do not want to have a tax code is because the moment I do that and the moment I enter the formal system, I open myself up to every law from the central government, from licensing to how I'm disposing of the chemicals that I'm using for the tanning industry, to zoning laws, to everything. If you then ask me to become a formal member of that supply chain, let's say it's a leather bag supply chain, then then the formal requirement is that I go to some industrial zone like Sibzi, rent an industrial place over there. Actually, if I have more than 20 people working for me, I have to go to the labor commissioner, start paying provident fund. More importantly, all my laborers live in Dharavi. Now they have to take a 2-hour journey to go to Sibzi, which means that I will have much larger labor absenteeism. So that's the permanent shock that you come if you are forcing these people to go into the white side of the economy. I'll give you another example. A very good friend of mine, she heads one of the large insurance companies. And she told me that in Eastern Zone, right? And a large number of the actual agents of insurance agents, people in their late 30s, early 40s, who have had 10, 15 years of experience, who know their clients, know the products, actually operate on cash because they are not but they haven't passed class 12. And if you haven't passed class 12, you cannot get a certification from the IRDA to be an actual insurance agent. So they all do cash business to somebody else who is the guy who has passed and has got an undergraduate degree and has a degree. So there is no way in which this person can ever enter the white economy unless IRDA goes and changes the requirement of who can become an insurance agent. And that's the regulatory cost that stops you from becoming anything, and that's the disruption we're talking about. Then, because the last point on transfer pricing, the point I was trying to make is that if you look at estimates of over-invoicing of imports and under-invoicing of exports, that's the single largest way in which India loses black of hiding black money or creating black wealth. And it goes through the entire banking system. There is no cash involved in it. It goes through the right accounting firms, and it is completely legal. And that's where the largest amount of black money, by any estimates. If you look at the National Institute of Public Finance, there are at least 3 or 4 working papers that's been written over the last 4 or 5 years, and there are a lot of people who have written that countries like China and India, that is the easiest and the largest way of taking money out of the country. It's legal, it's to the banks, there's no cash.
Thank you, Jahangir. Abhijit, any quick responses to any of the questions that have come?
Yeah, I will just reflect on what Jahangir said. I wish life of transparency was as simple of over-invoicing and under-invoicing. All my clients would have been happy. Unfortunately, the life is not so. There are rigors, there are rules, there are regulations on every side of the country, in India as well as outside. The days of inflating the invoices or under-invoicing are long gone, actually. In fact, if you are caught, you are not only caught from an income tax or corporate tax perspective, but you are also caught from the Foreign Exchange Management Act perspective, you are caught from the customs duty perspective. So, at least from my perspective, the clients that I work with, I don't see them going into an under-invoicing, over-invoicing. In fact, they are more worried that whether they are properly invoiced. Because the authorities can always challenge them that you are not operating within a range or a band, because in transparency rules we also operate in a range. If it is beyond that range, you'll be caught. Every year you have to file a TP documentation, be it in Singapore, be it in Australia, be it in India, anywhere in the world. And so the days of moving cash through a transfer pricing arrangements, I think, are almost dead. But there are flights which goes to Nepal, and from Nepal things happens. So there are other ways, but not necessarily through a transfer pricing.
So just to give you a rejoinder, as of, let's say, second quarter of this year, if you look at the total amount of imports India made based on the statistics of the exporting country, and you look at the amount of imports that Indian Custom registered, the amount of imports that India made based on customs data is about 20% higher than the amount of imports that other countries would claim that India has, other countries have exported from. This gap is large, it is huge, it's the same. Even if you take out defense imports, defense imports you once in a while. You do one aircraft carrier once in a while. It has been going on for many, many years, and that gap has increased. There's exactly the same gap that you have between Chinese export numbers, import numbers, and export and import numbers of China, import and Hong Kong. So maybe it's not transfer pricing. Maybe it's not transfer pricing. Maybe that's not the way it is done. But these are extremely large gaps.
Thank you, Jahangir. Thank you, Abhijit. I wish we could have taken more questions. Unfortunately, the watch indicates that we are stepping beyond time, and I understand this is a premise which needs to be vacated at some stage. There's some rules on this. So with that, I think what I will do is I'll hand the proceedings back to Taisha. Taisha.
Thank you, Dr. Palit, and the distinguished speakers for the insightful discussion. I would like to request the speakers to remain on stage for the presentation of tokens of appreciation. I would also like to invite Professor Subrata Mitra to come on stage to present the tokens of appreciation to our speakers. First, Dr. Subbarao. Dr. Aziz. And Mr. Ghosh. Thank you. I would like to invite Professor Mitra to remain on stage to deliver the vote of thanks and for Dr. Palit and the speakers to kindly take their seats.
Well, the one who didn't get a gift should get my first vote of thanks. That's Dr. Amitendu Palit, who has put this together at the shortest of short notices. Even more, he has persuaded two very important, very busy professionals, Dr. Aziz and Mr. Ghosh, to give their time to this event. ISIS is only a think tank. We don't offer anything except a platform to these busy professionals to come and share their time with ours. So well done for that. I would also like to thank the audience, because there can't be an event without the audience. But this is not just an ordinary audience, it's a Singapore audience, and Singapore audiences value knowledge because it's a knowledge economy. And this is what the ministries have in mind when they set up think tanks like ours, to make us think and to be ahead, a little ahead of the value chain of the rest of the world, so that those big cranes who bring us all these monies will stay down and not go up. And that was the first indicator I was given when I was made the director of ISIS. Look out of the window and count the cranes. So our job is to keep the cranes down, and that will happen if we think and think about what makes the business come, and this is part of that activity. Now, I would like to say a couple of words about the takeaway. What are we taking away from this event? Money. I mean, I have spent a long time in Germany. That was the last port of call before coming to Singapore. And this is how the Germans think about money. Money is not everything in life, but without money, everything becomes nothing. So, the rupee and its demonetization matter enormously. I'm only a political scientist. I've never handled large amounts of money, unlike my colleague Dr. Subbarao. And events like this give me a new respect for money and demystify a little bit about what is in the pocket and why it might become just a piece of paper without the trust and the credibility that events like this bring to money. So that's the economic bit I'll take away. But more than that, I would like to think a little bit about the politics of the demonetization and its timing. We have not talked about it enough, and I wish we had, because the rupee that has been demonetized, unlike the other initiatives of this government, has affected everybody. Now, Swachh Bharat, or Clean India, or Jan Dhan Yojana, creating a number of moneyless accounts or little bits of money in them, or Beti Padhao, Beti Bachao, educate the girl and protect the girl. These are important initiatives. They have affected people, but this one has touched them all. What might it be about? If you think about it, we are exactly at the midpoint of the mandate that Mr. Modi got in 2014. Last time the mandate came with a slogan, Abke baad Modi Sarkar. Give us a chance, the other people have had it for 10 years. It's a one-shot thing that wouldn't work again in 2018. So maybe I will now go back to what we learned from Dr. Subbarao. Maybe there's a plan behind it all, and they're acting according to the plan. So ferreting out black money was not just an empty slogan that it was not just hot air, there's a plan design behind it. Maybe we are getting ready for the next general election. I mean, as a political scientist, I would like to cast the timing of it in that kind of time scale. But with the economics of it and the politics of it, there is a third dimension that I had not thought about it before this meeting, but when I was listening to Mr. Ghosh, I'm very, very grateful for that simple demonstration, and it brought back the moral dimension with blinding clarity. Two folks with the same kinds of money, going about it differently, and the immoral one coming out better off. So there's a moral dimension to demonetization, which is not new. Some of you remember Nehru's threat to hang black marketeers from the nearest lamp post. Well, it didn't quite work out that way. Somewhere along the line, the Congress party lost the moral dimension when the political economy of India became a patronage-driven economy. Maybe the time has come to think about the morality of money and the immorality of having large amounts of it earned in an immoral way. Maybe one could take a leaf out of the Singapore book, which puts integrity on the top of everything else. I mean, India is not at war. England was at war when Churchill gave that slogan to work out for blood, sweat and tear, and that to fight by all one's might, or for that matter, the slogan of Kennedy, ask not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for the country. And well, I had 2,000 rupees in 500 rupee notes. I put them aside. I thought by not going back or giving back to the money supply, by reducing the amount of money in supply, I will be contributing to the deflationary trends of the demonetization. If there is less money changing limited number of goods, prices will go down. Anyway, maybe the time has come for the government and the country to think about a moment which comes in the life of every country where you ask, am I in it only for myself, or am I in it for the community? Or can I think about not just capitalism, but a kind of communitarian capitalism where you make money, all right, but think about the morality of it and think about the little fellows who were going through the floorboard, and maybe one could think about India's political economy also in terms of the moral dimension that underpins it. Anyway, these are my takeaways. I'm sure you've got yours, and you'll think about this event and come back to our other events. If you'd like to be kept informed of what we do, please give your name cards to my colleagues, and they are the ones I'll now name to praise, because at the shortest of short notices, Jordan and Yusuf and Sitara have put this event together, and I'd like to thank Tasha for her first stint as an MC. This is ISAS. It transforms young people into professionals overnight. Thank you, family. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I will now hand it over to Tasha to invite us to have a cup of tea and continue the conversation.
Thank you, Professor Mitra. With that, we have now come to the end of the ISIS Symposium. As Prof. Mitra said, we would like to invite you outside for some refreshments. We also thank you for your participation, and we hope to see you for future ISIS events. Thank you.